All right, we are live, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Like Connie. I'm your host, David Rich. I have two very special guests on tonight. We have Rebecca Whitcombe. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello.
Rebecca is a family law lawyer who's been on the show once before. We had a lovely chat. And then we have Erin Cartwright Weinstein, who is also a lawyer, but also is the Lake County Circuit Court clerk. Hello, Erin.
Hello.
Hello. So, okay, very cool. So we wanted to talk about ethics in the law, and you're both lawyers and trained in the applied ethics of law, which is cool. And I have a philosophy degree, and ethics is a branch of philosophy that's emphasized greatly by universities. And so I have some formal training in a different approach to ethics to what you have. More about like what counts as moral, what more of the philosophical questions. So it should be an interesting chat. And then we're going to tie that into divorce. Right. And I know I have a couple of people that have gone through divorces who are like, oh, interesting. I will definitely be watching. So, all right. So, Rebecca, we want to kick it off because family law, I'm sure, like you said before the show, all areas of law are pervaded with ethics, as well they should be. Law without morality is tyranny. So it's a bad idea. So I'm glad that that this country has that sort of notion and that disposition to apply ethics to all areas of law, at least in theory, because obviously at the federal level that's not happening. But we'll talk about that later. So in family law, go ahead and discuss ethics in law, and specifically family law. Go ahead.
Well, first, I think, generally speaking, when we're talking about ethics in the law, there is a very huge difference between ethics and morality. And when we're talking about legal ethics, it is so not the same thing as like philosophical ethics, right? When we talk about legal ethics, we are talking about professional responsibility, what our obligations as attorneys are to the judiciary, to our clients, to other attorneys, things like that. They are rules of behavior, even though we refer to them as ethical rules, right? So I think when people talk about legal ethics, they think it's got something to do with morality, and really it doesn't. It has to do with how we act toward our clients, how we act toward the judges, all of those kinds of things. And it can be as simple as, an issue of conflict of interest, like in a divorce case. You can't represent both sides. You can't represent the husband and the wife because they are adverse to each other. Right. So if you're representing one of them, it's a conflict for you to give any kind of legal advice or sometimes even communicate with the other. And it's also things as simple as privilege and confidentiality. We're required to keep the information that we find out from our clients confidential to a large extent. Sure. So those are kind of the big picture ethics things that, for me, I think are the most important to keep in mind when we're talking about legal ethics in general.
Ex parte communications.
That's a big one too. Yes.
What's that mean?
Yes.
What does that mean?
You can't have conversations as one side with the judge without the other side present. So, yeah. And that tends to be an issue.
Yeah.
So you mean judges have conversations with one side and not the other too often?
Right.
Yes.
Well,
and it's more, usually the judges stop it, but it's more the attorneys or the pro se litigants attempting to get the judge's attention to hear them out without the other side present. And that creates a problem for the judge if they're trying to be impartial, because you can't unhear something.
Right.
True.
Right. And one of the biggest, I think, issues that we had, I don't know if we have it as much anymore because it's, we've got more digitized systems, but it used to be that, anybody could send something in the mail to a judge. So people who didn't have lawyers would just send a letter to the judge pleading their case, right? And the judge would get this letter in the mail and they can't read it. So the minute they see that it comes in, they have to bring it up in court. They have to advise the lawyers of record, I received this communication and that kind of thing. And that, one of the, big issues with legal ethics is that we as attorneys know what they are. But the parties who represent themselves don't necessarily know what some of these rules of ethics are, and they therefore violate them frequently.
Right.
Yeah, no,
And we get a,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, we still get a lot of letters into the clerk's office that are addressed to the judge that didn't go to the other side.
Mhm.
And that happens, I mean, I would probably say a few times a week. And whether sometimes it could be on the criminal side, it could be a prisoner who's in Department of Corrections and they're trying to plead to the judge for something. And then we usually just take that and upload it into the system and treat it like a motion, but then allow the judge to then say at a later date, in court, I can't hear this. It wasn't properly filed. And, it'll just sit there. The judge doesn't even typically see it. So it's kind of varying ways of, managing that. Criminal side, or I'm sorry, civil side, pro se litigants mail stuff all the time. We don't really have that problem with the judges, but we do also have an email service that we used to use more during COVID, and now our system, our new justice system is up and running, and so it's not, people aren't sending as much through the email, but they're constantly trying to talk to the judge through the email, or they'll start fighting over email, and the judge can see it, my clerk can see it, and then there's just these attorneys just going at it. So then we have to like cut them off.
Yeah,
So
that's kind of funny. I mean, it's tragic, but it's also funny. What was I going to say? So to the extent that which lawyers have to like abide, like, do you have a board of, I'm assuming you have a board of ethics or some sort of like, entity that is like, they're the ethicists when it comes to all these things. And
Yeah,
you
it's called the ARDC. The ARDC, the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Committee.
Is that
Commission?
federal, state, county? It's
State.
Okay.
It's Illinois. Yeah. Every state has one. You have to actually pass like an ethics, like a professionalism and ethics background check kind of thing before you can even become a lawyer. Part of the bar exam has to do with legal ethics issues.
Interesting.
So it's something that it's something that kind of gets pounded into us very, very early and often. And we're required to get continuing legal education every year throughout our careers. And part of that has to be in areas of ethics and diversity.
Didn't you just have a meeting on that?
Last Friday, we had a big all-day ethics seminar. Yeah.
How'd that go?
It went really well. We had some great
Was it ethical?
And it was very ethical. But it's ethics, diversity, inclusion, mental health is part of what we have to get in there. So all of those things were included. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the lawyers that I worked with in the law office was on that conference like all day.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting.
And then we have the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, and they're attached to our Supreme Court. And our Supreme Court comes down with new rules that that the attorneys have to follow. So we have the Illinois Rules of Professional Responsibility that they write, and that's, we have to follow that. It talks about competence, diligence, scope of your representation,
conflict, all of it. Yep.
But okay, so what is if a lawyer or a judge breaks an ethical standard within the law, within the judicial system, is it illegal? Are they always the same?
Well, it depends on what it is.
Sometimes? Go ahead, sorry.
Well, it could be.
Okay.
But isn't
it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends if they misuse client funds, which is part of our Illinois Rules of Professional Responsibility. That can, you could be charged with theft. So that could be part of it. That's typically the big thing that you see the ARDC, suspending and disbarring lawyers for is typically misuse of client funds. Yeah. So that, and it depends on how they misused it. Did they move it early from their client trust fund into their own fund before they'd actually billed for it? Well, they're probably not going to find that to be a theft. They're probably just going to, deal with it on the Attorney Registration Disciplinary Commission's their attorneys will handle it, and their board would review those issues and decide what, if anything, punishment there is. It could be anything from slapping them on the hand to disbarring them.
Well, disbarring would be bad. But like, okay, like going back to your other example, like if a judge, talks to one lawyer and not the other, and about a specific case, is that illegal, or is that just sort of like
It's not a
punishable?
crime. So when you say illegal, it's not a crime. It's a violation of our rules of ethics.
Right.
So it's something that they could be reported to the ARDC for and could get some sort of potential punishment for it. The attorney could, not necessarily the judge. There's a judicial board of ethics that's actually separate from the ARDC that governs judicial ethics specifically. And I'm not quite as familiar as those, not having ever been a judge, but they also have their own rules of ethics they have to follow. But just because it's a violation of our ethics rules doesn't mean it's per se illegal.
Right. Okay.
And they'll typically, most of the time, you'll see the judge cut somebody off and then inform the other side that this happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I've seen judges call the other side into court, have us tell them, hey, we need you to come in. What day can you come in? We've had the judges wait until the next court date and say something to the other side. And then at that point, the other, typically if there's going to be a report to the ARDC, at that point, it's going to be the other lawyer. It's not going to be the judge. So yeah, so you'll find they'll make a decision, but usually under those circumstances, the judge will just say that was really inappropriate. I'm not going to have this conversation with you, and they'll cut them off right there. But if it's too extensive, I suppose the judge could use criminal contempt.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
There's different types of contempt. That they have direct and indirect criminal contempt and direct and indirect civil contempt. And so depending on where the situation fell, they could do something under those circumstances.
Okay. Are there any kind of gray areas, some ambiguous areas of the ethics within your situation where, like, was it really unethical? Like, I know what it says in
all
paper.
gray areas. They're all always gray areas.
Welcome to my world as a philosopher.
Yes. It's so the good thing about that is that actually the ARDC has like this hotline where they have attorneys who are very, very familiar with the rules of ethics. And we as attorneys have the ability to call them anonymously, and we can't give them specific information about a case or something, but we can sort of pose hypotheticals and say, let's say there was a situation in which this thing happened. Would that be a violation of this rule of ethics? And they can kind of, again, hypothetically speaking, advise you, well, here's what this rule says, so it's possible it could be a violation of this specific rule or something like that. So because there's almost always a gray area.
So from that, would you say that there's a massive lack of consensus on what counts as the ethical standard? Like, let's say you call this a hotline and give them the hypothetical, and the lawyer responds with hypothetically, this is what would probably be the case. And that then with the actual situation that you're hypothetically referring to, you apply that standard, and it turns out the judge is like, no, that's not right. Like, does that make sense? Like, not everybody's on the same page when it comes to these things.
Potentially. Because there are written rules, right? And Erin, interrupt me anytime, but there are written rules, and there are comments to those rules and interpretations of those rules. So there is at least a way to, find some grounds for a rule applying to a situation. The issue becomes more whether, okay, maybe this rule was violated, maybe not. But if it was, what's the harm? What's the damage? Is it something that's sanctionable? Is it something that, rises to the level of the attorney needing to be, censured or in some way, admonished about it?
Okay.
Yeah, it's all over the board. I had one situation where I really thought it was a major violation, and I kind of got poo-pooed about it. So
oh, really?
You just don't know,
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense.
I did make a call to the ARDC, and they're like, "Oh, call the state's attorney." So then I turned over the state's attorney, and they're like, you know. So, and and maybe because it happened in my office, I was so mad, but yeah, maybe it was,
Sure.
I took it a little bit more personally, but yeah, I swore that one.
Yeah. No, I mean, ethics, in your situation, in your context, and morality in more general context. I mean, has a lot to do with like kind of personal and cultural values as well. And maybe I would draw the distinction between morals and ethics on that level. Like I would say morals are more like about absolutes, human rights, and stuff like that, and ethics is more like applied and situational and that kind of thing, specific to whatever is going on at the time. So you're including a lot of like personal values. We each have our own personal values, set of personal values, whether we are conscious of them or not. And so and some would count that as a bias. Some would say no, that's just how it is. So I would see that that can be really difficult, coming from like different political, socio-political, economic positions as lawyers and judges and stuff like that. That carries a whole weight of
well, and one of the big things is there are things that are legally ethical that most people would consider to be morally reprehensible.
Oh, I have a bumper sticker with a slogan motto that I came up with, and I have more if you want one. On the back of my truck, it says morality always trumps the law, because the morality and the law are not. The slavery was the law,
right?
Yeah.
The Jim Crow laws,
yeah,
those are not moral. Yeah. Okay, stuff like that, and like
right. But I'm talking more like, okay, so let me give you an example. I used to teach this one. There was a case where a person was convicted of a very serious crime and did a lot of time in prison. While they were in prison, their attorneys found out, or actually, no, the attorneys for somebody else found out that another person had confessed to the crime that this person had been convicted of. They had privilege. They couldn't tell anybody that they knew that this person was innocent because of our rules of ethics. Once their client, who was the one that confessed, died, they were able to disclose it. But by then, the person who had been convicted had already served literally a lifetime in prison. But they couldn't do anything about it. Most people would say, morally speaking, that's disgusting.
Oh, it's reprehensible.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree. But from a legal ethics standpoint, if they had disclosed that information while their client was still alive, they could have lost their license. So it was the legally ethical thing to do, but it was not necessarily something most people would consider moral.
And those conversations with attorneys happen all the time. Like, what should I do? How do I handle this? Yeah. I mean, there's Rebecca and I, when we were practicing family law together, would say, hey, now hypothetically,
right.
What would you do?
Right.
I mean, because we have to kind of bounce those things off each other and brainstorm.
Sure. Oh, yeah, two heads are better than one kind of thing.
Yeah.
What if those lawyers would have just said, like, screw it, I'll lose my license. My license isn't as worthy as somebody's freedom.
If they wanted to never work as a lawyer again, they.
But I mean, would the person have gotten out of jail, or the judge be like, no, sorry?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. Not necessarily. It's not automatic. That person was still convicted by a jury of a crime. There's still a process that would have to be gone through to try to exonerate them. It's not like they were let out the next day or anything like that. There's a process to everything. But the issue is, like, not for nothing, but Erin and I went to school for a really long time to be able to do this for a living. Right. So if we were ever in a position where we couldn't do it, I don't know what else I would do. Right. It's the only thing I know how to do. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's, screw it, I'll just lose my license. Well, okay, great. But what about my entire career? What about my entire life? What about my entire education? And again, I'm not saying that from a moral perspective, my career should be more important than somebody else's freedom, but that's the kind of thing we have to think about.
Oh, 100%. No, I agree. I was just curious, like, what would happen? Would the judge let that criminal, the accused, out of jail or not? If they did come
potentially.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, they'd have to have enough evidence that that person wasn't conspiring in that crime, wasn't involved in that crime, wasn't at the scene of that crime. Like they're going to go through a whole full investigation before they're going
Right.
to do anything else. And so it takes a long time. There's a show on Amazon called Convicted, I think, and it's about a guy who was charged with murder when he was, I think he was in his teens, like he was in high school, and he is now an attorney in New Jersey. But
Well, good for him.
it's yeah, I mean, and so I think it's New Jersey, it might be New York. But yeah, it's very you know, he was wrongfully convicted. And so, but the process, he talks about the process, and then he talks about getting reuniting back into society, which was a really fascinating part. But um yeah, it's
What is? I
that's
think
a
I've
really
heard of
long
this
process.
recently. I heard about somebody who went to jail, who was innocent and studied law and got out and passed the bar. And this might be the same person.
There's
What
a
is this called?
couple. Well, there's actually one in there is an attorney in New Orleans who just won the circuit clerk position in New
Mm.
Orleans in the parish. Um and so he was also wrongfully convicted and got
Went to
out
law
of jail
school
and
from
went to law school.
jail and came
Now he's an
out.
elected official. So yeah,
Good for
so
him.
there's a couple out there that are pretty popular, that have talked about what has happened to them. But yeah, it's a long process, and it's kind of interesting because as Rebecca's talking about, our obligations as lawyers, there's also it's different for social workers, it's different for
Mhm.
therapists. I mean, if they find out that you convicted a crime or you you know, past, present, or you're about to, they have a different reporting
Yeah.
obligation.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. Like again, it's more situational. It's more specific to different situations. It's
Mhm.
and a little less, kind of like universally applicable.
Right.
That wouldn't make any
Right.
sense. That wouldn't even work. Why would a social worker have to do the same things a lawyer does? They're not lawyers. Like it doesn't make any sense.
No, but it's still the concept that I can feel how those lawyers would feel when you are holding on to this information and you know that the information you're holding on to is holding someone who didn't do it in jail.
Mhm.
It's a
I don't know. That's a tough. Like I'm really like
painful.
that. That bothers me. Like I understand what you're saying. That like it's your life, it's your career. Yeah, but I don't know, man. That's
Yeah.
tough.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the
It's
moral
really
versus
tough.
It is.
Somebody,
yeah.
if I knew somebody was rotting in jail for had a life sentence or life term, and I knew they were innocent. Oh boy, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'd feel even worse if it was me rotting in jail and I knew I was innocent.
Well.
I don't know what I would like. Erin, you and I had this
Yeah.
conversation on a show a long time ago. I remember this. We're like, I don't know what I would do if I was convicted of a crime that I knew I didn't commit. I don't know. I really don't, because that's fucked up. So I'm
Keep
sorry.
fighting.
Yeah.
Well,
Keep
and as
fighting,
horrible
yeah.
as this sounds, the likelihood of that happening for you as a white male is far less likely than it is for some.
Oh, 100%.
That's
So,
true.
No, I know.
Although
It's pretty sad.
the guy in New York is a white male.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it happens to across the
It can happen to anyone.
But there are definitely statistical
Mhm.
peaks amongst other demographics
Absolutely.
for sure.
Yeah.
There's no doubt there. Let me ask you this. This is kind of like this is a little weird. It was something that just popped in my head a few minutes ago. Concerning like ethics of like sentencing, like after somebody's convicted, right? There was a judge, not around here. I don't know where she was from. I think it happened a couple of years ago, where there was some sort of like it was a family law thing where like a trial case, the kids and the father, something happened. I don't know, it was negligence or abuse or something like that. And the judge sided with the father because the kids didn't want to have to live with the father, and she forced them to live with them, even though they didn't want to. And they were about like 12 to 15ish. I mean, they weren't like little toddlers or and she actually ordered them to hang out with their father, get along with their father, and to love their father because he loves them. And everybody's just like, wait, what? You can't order somebody to love somebody else. That's ridiculous. She got in trouble. Like she was put on trial. And the Supreme Court of the state or whoever it was, maybe the county people, I don't know, said that the public embarrassment wasn't enough of a punishment for her, and they kind of like dropped it all, like let her go back to being a judge. What so like what kind like that? It's I remember seeing the clip of she saying that in court, and I'm like, but that doesn't even make any sense. How do you can't force somebody to love somebody? Like it's not even possible. You can force somebody to go through the perceived behaviors of loving somebody, but loving something is an internal state. It's not something that I could fake loving somebody. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure.
Okay, of course it does.
Sure.
Are there ethics, or is it all merely legalities when it comes to sentencing, or both?
Well, so that's not really a
go
sentencing thing. Erin, go ahead. I imagine we were about to say the same thing.
Okay.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I was gonna. No, I'm trying to remember. Go ahead, because I can't remember what I was gonna say.
It's not really a sentencing thing. Sentencing only happens in criminal cases. So when we're talking about sentencing, we're talking about like sentencing you to time in jail or something like that. This was, more of just an order, a court's order.
Okay.
And obviously there are limits to what a court can order. Family court, what judges can and can't do in family court is very much defined by statute. The Illinois Marriage and Dissolution of Marriage Act sort of defines the scope of what a judge can and cannot do in a family law case in terms of custody, child support, maintenance, property, all that kind of stuff. There is absolutely nothing in any statute that allows a judge to order a child to love a parent. And it's how in the world anything could be enforceable for something like that is, another issue. But this is where, family law is very, very fraught. It's very emotional in a way that other areas of law simply are not. And, sometimes you have judges who pay no attention to the rules of evidence because they want to try to do what's right for the family. And, there's this best interest of the child standard that can be a little loosey-goosey sometimes. And, people do crazy stuff, and you get judges who do weird shit like that. So
Yeah, that's very true. You're right. I was about to say the same thing, is that in sentencing, which is in the criminal cases, that is very designed by statute. And so the judges really have to follow the guidelines provided by statute. And if they don't follow those guidelines, then that certainly, and the defense attorney will most likely file a notice to appeal and appeal the sentencing. So, and the I would call it a ruling that the judge made saying you must love your parent. I mean, but obviously that is never.
It was pretty stupid, yeah.
Yeah,
but again,
it's never going to
she got
fly.
in trouble, and like it was because it was all over.
good.
And
Right.
she was. I mean, I thought it was interesting and satisfying to me at least that her punishment was just the massive amount of public embarrassment she had to suffer.
Yeah.
Good.
And yeah, and I mean, and following what Rebecca was saying with family law being like one of the most emotional areas, I mean, I would agree with that. I would say some criminal cases are incredibly emotional as well, but the difference that you have there is that you have one side that has, a family member who is going through a tough time, and you've got an attorney on that side, who's defending the person, and then on the other side, the victim's family and the victim. And so, but the state's attorney's office, who's going to be representing them, it has kind of a separation from them that the family law attorney does not have from one side, because they're representing the state of Illinois. So their job isn't necessarily to do what the victim is asking them to do. Their job is to follow, well, this is the act that was committed. These are the elements of that act that I have to prove. And they care very much. I'm not trying to insinuate they don't care, but it's not the same as when it's your client, and there's kind of a little bit of an enmeshment there when you're trying to represent them and doing what they're asking you to do, that you have to make sure remains ethical, versus a state's attorney who can kind of separate themselves a bit from the people that they're working with. I think it's more of like I'm working with the victim's family more than I'm not really representing.
Right. It's like an
that
emotional
family.
sort of detachment there that
Right.
doesn't exist as much in family law.
Right, because you're moving through your cases, and then with criminal, you're gonna find a case ends. With family, you're gonna find a case keeps going and going and going. So if you've been working with these people for, 15 years as their kids are growing up and dealing with all the issues, I mean, the enmeshment there between lawyer and client is definitely more significant, I would, and
Well,
so that creates tension between attorneys, and it creates tension
sure.
between each side, and a little bit more than you would see, the state's attorney's more or less gonna, I'm doing my job, and the defense attorney can be as crazy as they want to be, but the state's attorney can be like, I don't care how you feel, I just have to do my job,
Right.
or how crazy you're acting, just go away,
Yeah, and it
versus we
seems
have
to
to interact.
Yeah, and plus too, I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know firsthand about this, but it seems to me it would be the case that like family law dealing with families, we all have families. So there's an automatic amount of like empathy there, a family being torn apart by divorce with children involved, like that's gonna like unless you're like just a sociopathic monster, that's gonna tug at your heartstrings, man. That's tough stuff, and families are very important to just about everybody in the world. Okay, so like it's what I'm saying. We're like, as a lawyer, you can't you're defending, an accused murderer. Well, I've never murdered anybody. I don't have any empathy towards what you've done. That's crazy. I might even, I'll do my job and defend you, but I might actually find you to be repulsive. I have like no empathy for you whatsoever. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I will tell you also that there are people who do criminal defense and other areas of law, and they will defend the worst kind of criminal defendant, but they will not step foot in a family law courtroom.
That's very true.
Because of the emotionally chargedness of it all. They want nothing
They
to
prefer to like a lawyer within the context of, or like in a detached manner. They don't want to be empathetic. They don't want emotional connections with their clients.
Well, and I don't want to say, I think I would be a little bit different from your statement in that I think that there are criminal defense attorneys and state's attorneys who have been through tough times, and they have to then prosecute someone who maybe did that to them, or maybe they had a family member who was murdered, or things happen sometimes that drive us to want to practice in certain areas, um so I think with me, like I started off as a state's attorney and I loved it, but I think sometimes family law took me over a little because I always want to fix everybody, I want to fix everything, right? um so, and you can't do that in criminal. The cases come in, the cases go out. And so when I was a
Interesting.
state's
Yeah.
attorney, I would take my case, I would either plea it out, or you know, I would try it, and then that case would go away. And it probably, if it did come back, it probably wouldn't necessarily come back to me if the person violated, the terms of their probation or supervision or whatever they were on. So, those cases kind of move through a little differently, but I disagree. The only point I was just going to say is that I do think sometimes the things that have happened, you know it could be a defense attorney representing somebody who did something terrible, but they also look at it differently too. It's like, to me, we have to have defense attorneys, because if we don't have defense attorneys, then we don't have anyone who says, hey, the cop violated the law. You couldn't do that. You can't just bust into somebody's home and arrest them. Like, you have to have a search warrant. You have to have an arrest warrant. Like, there are processes and procedures you have to go through. You can't just walk up to a car and grab someone out of it and take off with them. Like, you have to have reasonable suspicion to pull them over. Like,
Tell ice that. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh no. So there's like, you can take, you can take the fact that, you have a client who maybe or maybe didn't do this terrible thing, but then on the other hand, we protect people so they don't, to the best of our ability, aren't wrongfully convicted. And so you have to make sure that all of the steps were completed, or we don't have a democracy anymore, right?
100%.
So that's our problem with ICE right now, right? It's not a democracy. And so, but that's what the defense attorneys are there for, and that's why they're important.
Making sure the state's doing their job and doing it right, basically.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, that's good. I mean, and just like, is it in the Constitution that anybody charged of a crime, like, it deserves representation?
Yep.
That's why we have public defenders now. That started in the 60s. It took an awfully long time to get there. But okay, like, I remember when I first saw, like, the 60s. What? That's like 100 over, like, almost 200 years of, like, not that. Like, but like what you were saying, Erin, like defense attorneys are important too, because what if the accused is actually innocent of the crime? Like, I mean, again, like, well, somebody has to help prove that or show that.
Yeah. So it's like you look at it as saying, well, did someone get off on a technicality? I mean, maybe they did, but I guess that all the steps that went up to this person being arrested or going to trial should have been handled better,
Right.
and
Interesting.
correctly.
Yeah. So you talked about, like, wanting to fix people in family law. Is there any degree or element of, like, lawyers within family law, like dealing with a divorce or whatever, actually trying to mediate?
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
Like, trying to, like, well, maybe you guys can actually work this out, but instead of going to, you do that?
Oh yeah. So
Okay.
mediation is actually, in family law, mediation is actually required in cases involving custody of children. So there are court approved I was one for many years. And so whenever custody became an issue, if the parties couldn't agree on what custody arrangements they were going to make, they would be required to mediate, or at least try to mediate the issue. So it's required where children are involved. It's optional with regard to other things. But yeah, mediation is huge in family law.
Yeah. I mean, but it depends on the lawyer that you hire too, and it depends on the situation. I mean, there's certain lawyers that want to sit down and work things out more than other lawyers. I have always had the, thought process that when you settle a case, you have some control. If you go to trial, control's in the judge's hands. I mean, you can do the best job in the world and for your client and still lose. So I always say I've won ones I thought I was going to lose and lost some that I thought I was going to win. So it's a toss up, and you think, oh, all these facts mean something, but when you put them in front of the judge and the other side presents their side, depends on what the judge thinks of it. So it's, but it depends on the lawyer. There's certain lawyers that just want to litigate. They just, that's their nature, and you can't get stuff done behind the scenes with them. And then there's others that they're, really reasonable to work with, and you can kind of sit down and lay everything on the table and work it out. So it's all
Well,
over the board.
it also depends on the parties, because
And the
sometimes
parties.
you get two parties who are like, you know what, we're on pretty good terms. We just want to get this resolved, and it's, easy peasy. And there are others where, like, literally you put them in a room together and it's like oil and water. They can't agree on that the grass is green,
Right.
Yeah, it very much
Yep.
depends.
What about
That's very true.
ethics for juries? I know there's such a thing as jury instruction, because you yank people off the street. What the hell do we know about the law? Nothing.
So so when you're called in for jury duty, the first day that you're there, the reason they all have to come in day one is because the judge gives them their instructions. So they know exactly when they go in, what the rules are. And, you have to give the deputy your cell phone. You can't discuss this case, a case that you're on outside of the courtroom once the case is started. You can't go in and look at publications about, oh, did so-and-so ever do anything before? Like, they get all of those rules up front from the chief judge. And then once they go in, if they've been chosen for a jury trial, the judge will then give them, like, admonish them again before the end of the day when they leave, so they know. And that's why some cases they're so serious that the juries are sequestered.
Understood. Okay, so but are they taught how to, like, properly analyze a case? Like, that's one of the things that concerns me about our jury-based judicial system, is that you just yank 12 people who know nothing about the law or proper critical thinking or logic or ethics, and they're just like, yeah, sure, sounds guilty to me. And that's the extent of their analysis, is a hunch.
That's where the jury instructions come into play because, and Erin can speak to this far more than I can. I have never had a case with a jury. Juries aren't involved in family law. But my understanding is that the instructions that they get once the case is handed over to them are specific enough that they have like specific questions they have to answer and things like that.
That's
depending on the kind of case.
Yeah, so they at the end they do get their jury instructions. That does give the elements of the case. There's a very set book of instructions that the defense attorneys have and the state's attorney's office has. And then once the case is they've finished, usually the jury will go, like once they've rested both sides and finished closing arguments, they will then release the jury, and the judge will take a look at all of the instructions along the way, because sometimes the judge makes rulings on things such as, there's 6 counts to this case, and count 3 I dismissed it, on a directed finding at the close of the state's case. So then any instruction regarding that will get pulled out, or there maybe something happened during the case where the judge decides, well, I want a specific instruction, and then one of the attorneys will have to provide that specific instruction. Sometimes they create an instruction and the judge will have to look at it and say, yes, I'm okay with this. No, I'm not. But those instructions are very much about the elements of the case and what the state needed to prove in order for the person to be found guilty. And then the things that they can take into consideration, for example, in a DUI, if someone doesn't blow, they can take into consideration that person didn't blow and look at it as something against them, and an inference of guilt at the trial. So those are the kinds of instructions that they get, but you still have a lot of, as you're talking about, everybody comes in with their own subjective and objective views. And I remember winning a case once, and it was against an attorney. He did a good job. I had a lot of respect for this attorney. Actually liked trying cases with him because it was a nice interaction. It wasn't we weren't fighting with each other. We were getting along and still talking, even though we were doing our jobs. And so he was chewing gum. Jury was furious and told me what a lack of respect that was to them. And I feel like they saw him chewing gum over the facts of the case. And it's not, of course I wanted to win, and and I was glad I did, but you still get those weird, you're going to have people who don't like certain types of people. You can ask a million questions in the voir dire of the jury beforehand. Have these things ever happened to you? Can you be impartial? Your second aunt was murdered and they never found her body, but can you be impartial here? Well, I didn't know her and I just heard the story, so it doesn't bother me.
And they also just sort of take the juror's word for it. Like, oh, you can be impartial?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. He's impartial.
Yeah. and so, I mean, it's a really different experience working with jurors. Like, I actually kind of liked it because I kind of had a way I worked with jurors before I did a trial. And I kind of knew what they were like before I would start my trial, and I could kind of change and mold myself to like trying to, connect with them. But it depends. Is that the kind of attorney that you have that connects with people, or is this a jury that doesn't want that kind of person? They think it's too mushy gushy and that you're just trying to be their friend. And, so it's so different, like every jury trial. So jury trials are tough. I mean, obviously I was a defendant in a jury trial, and it was tough, so I have a lot of empathy for people when they're going through trials now, because it's not easy.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think we should have professional jurors. I'm not kidding. Like the whole notion of just pulling 12 people out of the public to listen to like sophisticated, highly abstract, laws and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Give me a break. That's ridiculous. But okay. Yeah.
But it's in the Constitution. So
yeah. Well, so is the 3/5 clause. Just because somebody wrote something down doesn't mean that it has to be true. I mean, it's not how that works, but okay. But okay, so we did talk about family law. We talked some about divorce. Is there anything specific about divorce you wanted to discuss, or was it just kind of like what we did, where we found like the ethical dimensions of divorce law and stuff like that, divorce cases?
No, I mean, I think when, we had all been talking about this concept previously, a lot of it, we were kind of conversing about how attorneys get along with each other and how they treat each other. Um, and I think that that is something that I think it's probably worse in family law than any other area of the law. Um,
Absolutely. Civility.
there's,
The
yeah,
civility between lawyers and
Yeah,
opposing sides.
yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, swearing at each other and, and I
Because of the
really,
emotional depth and connection thereof, you think you said before, you think that has a lot to do with that sort of antagonism.
I mean, I think that's part of it. I think there there's kind of two kinds of family lawyers. One is, yes, you're my client. Yes, I will advocate for you vigorously. I'm not going to do anything unethical. I'm not going to, act like I'm in third grade and play the, well, she didn't, so why do I have to game? Like, I'm going to run this case like the responsible attorney I am, and I'm not going to feed into the drama, right? That's attorney A. Attorney B is, I'm going to take every word my client says as the gospel. I'm going to exercise absolutely no client control. I'm going to advocate for everything they want, regardless of whether I believe it's reasonable or not. And when you get those kinds of attorneys on a case, it can turn, it can turn into the biggest nightmare, because there needs to be, as much as it's hard to stay emotionally detached in family law for most of us, there still needs to be a little bit of, I cannot make your drama my drama. And I think that is a big struggle in family law. And I think that's part of the reason for the incivility amongst family law attorneys.
and I think they get overwhelmed. I mean, it's um
It has the
very
highest
over
burnout rate of all areas of
right.
law, family law, and I can easily see why. Easily,
Yeah,
that's I wouldn't do it.
I mean it is I mean, it never ends, right? The motions coming in never end, and the discovery that has to be turned over never ends. And if you don't have enough staff to be able to manage
Mm-hmm.
the caseload, and then you get behind, and then you get angry. And, I think I remember when I was practicing it full time and coming home, and Dave's like, you need to leave that at the office. And I'm like, I can't. Like,
Yeah.
I can't leave it at the office. Like, I would come home just super stressed. Well, that leads to, you know, not getting along with people, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, that's not really my nature to be rude and nasty to people, but
But it can bring that out in you sometimes. It just
yeah,
brings it out, literally brings it out in you.
No, I believe, yeah,
right.
exactly. And again, it has to do at least with, in part, with the fact again that family is just too pervasive and important to, like, the entire human condition.
Well,
You
and
know,
also,
like,
there have actually been studies that show that the process of going through a divorce is the emotional equivalent of a death of a close family member.
that's awful.
So it's literally going through that process of, denial and
Grief and
blame and all of that stuff.
reconciliation and right.
We are getting good people going through the worst time of their entire lives and having to deal with that on a daily basis with every single case. And it really does. Not only do family lawyers have the highest rate of burnout amongst lawyers, they have the highest rate of getting ethical complaints filed against them than just about any other practice area. They have the highest level of violence against them by parties to a case than any other practice of law. So, all of that, when you add all of that, I have had death threats as an attorney. I have had to call the police. And,
Yeah.
so it's real. Like, the emotional part of it kind of goes deep when you take all that into consideration.
Yeah, for sure. That's tough. That's
Yeah,
what,
I never had a death threat, but I remember, so we have another friend who's now a judge, but she and I had a case against each other, and her client came at me, and I remember she's like tinier than me, her jumping in between and stopping him. And and it was just, she's this little girl, big personality, but little. Um, and so, you know, you, it really is a tough area. I mean, it's the highest murder rate in all areas of the law, which you would think criminal would be. And
Yeah, I totally would.
Yeah.
yeah, it's actually family. But
Really?
it's the scariest time of your life too, because you're taking what was always you know, the financial support for one household and dividing it into two, right?
Mhm.
So now you have, how am I going to live? How am I going to eat? How are my kids going to go to school? How am I going to, I have to, give up my lifestyle, and people don't know how to give up their life. I mean, I don't know how to give up my lifestyle. Someone looked at me and said, "Go live like that." I would be like, I couldn't move
Yeah.
to Africa, and I can barely camp. Um, actually, I can't camp. I'll just be honest.
We know this.
But not a camper.
That's okay.
But I just I think that is the most it is definitely the most difficult, scariest, and fear turns into anger,
Yeah, sure.
when
Anger,
you can't
anxiety.
control it.
Mhm.
And I think that there's a lot of that. And there's not a real, if that same person was sitting in a room with his buddy listening to the stuff as he was doing that, and his buddy said he was doing, he'd probably tell him to stop,
Mhm.
but
Sure.
they don't see it that way, and they can't. Their minds are just going and going and going. And there's like, to Rebecca's point earlier, that you can manage some clients, manage their expectations, manage their behaviors, manage how the case goes. And there's other clients that you just can't,
Mhm.
and they lie to you, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? I just made a fool out of myself in court defending you on that, and you
Yeah.
actually did do it. So it's,
If you were to draw a pie chart of all that sort of like affects the intensity slash drama of a family law case, like a divorce, say, part of one of the slices would be like the division of like finances, division and property. Another part would be like, custody of, well, no, okay. How much, what size pie slice has to do with children?
With children,
Yes. Would
if
you say
there are
25%, 50? Like, I mean, how much does the allocation of custody, time, days, blah blah blah, or if one side doesn't get any custody at all, or no visitation of children, does that like go into like typical family law divorce cases? Because it seems to me like the children would be a big factor, at least emotionally.
the children are usually a primary factor. So
okay.
in family law, by statute, when there are children involved in a case, custody issues have to get addressed first. So one of the first thing that a judge asks is, are there any children? If so, is there an agreement about custody? If not, you are getting into mediation right now. And they get that process started right away when a case gets filed. So I don't know if there's any way to assign it in a pie chart, but I can
Yeah.
tell you that the custody issues do take priority in the eyes of the court.
Yeah, and it's all over the board as to people who come in and they can easily resolve the issues with the kids, and those who can't. I mean, I would say typically those of us practicing family law, we only really get those cases when they're fighting, right?
Mhm.
So to us, it's a huge part of the pie. In the overall, you know, like take like county, I have no idea how many actually can be resolve on their own, and how many we
Yeah.
fight, because we see just the fighting.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
And that's really what the judge sees too, because those are the cases that go before him. The other cases just prove up really quickly and they're done. Sometimes they have lawyers, sometimes they don't.
And honestly, kind of what the pie chart looks like is going to be different for every case, because it's going to depend. Like, you might have one family with 3 kids and another family with 3 kids. And in one family, they're like, we're really amicable about how we want to raise our kids. So that piece of the pie is going to be kind of small in that case. Whereas you get to the other family and they're like, they both are saying, I demand custody of these children. Custody is going to be a much bigger piece of the pie for that case. So it's really very
Right.
case specific. Yeah.
Interesting. You ever seen the movie Kramer versus Kramer?
Yes.
I don't think
Dustin
I
Hoffman and Meryl
have.
Streep.
I know the movie, but I don't think I have ever.
You know the basic premise of the
Yeah.
movie. Like
Yeah.
she leaves them, and he, and then she comes back and says, "I want the kid," and he's like, "What the hell? Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
Is there any sort of like explicitly or implicitly in the law any sort of like, would you say, statistical advantage towards the mother?
I would say that's changing. I would say when we were in our beginning stages of family law in the early 2000s, that it was definitely more female. Um, but now we've really seen a major shift in the last 26 years of, women working and women having their own assets and their own
Mhm.
401ks and their own, and more daycares are being used. And so I think we're,
More
I mean,
fathers are playing a bigger role in their children's lives, frankly.
yeah. And I mean, there's some stay-at-home dads. I've seen more of that recently than I've ever seen before,
Sure.
or more women who are the primary bread makers. And that was not,
CEO for companies and so all sorts of
Mhm.
fiscally
yeah.
advantageous positions. Yeah, you bet.
I
I
mean, I
think
think
he's
probably in the last 10 years, that's really
really
made a
shifted. Totally
big
agree.
shifted. Yeah.
I think there's still a little bit of an unconscious bias for a lot of people based on kind of those old ideas that mother always knows best. But I would say, there were a number of cases throughout my career where, I got custody of these kids for their father.
Yeah.
In certain situations.
Yeah.
So legally speaking, I don't think there's any kind of preference for a mother anymore. I
It's
think from a
not written in
legal
the law, like,
standpoint,
favor the mom.
Right.
right. And it used to be, and it's not
Yeah.
anymore. But I also think there's been a lot of movement. Part of it is this father's rights movement, which is a little bit fraught in and of itself, but
Oh, sure.
this push, to make sure like fathers really are stepping up. Fathers are proving to be the better parent in a lot of cases. And I think that there are some people who still have that in their heads that the mother always knows best. But I think from a legal standpoint, I don't think we're there anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. And I remember we had a legislator who wanted to go in and modify our legislation to say that it wasn't best interest anymore, but that it was an automatic assumption that the
Mhm.
party should have 50-50 because that's what her constituents were asking for. And it didn't end up going through. I mean, was that 10 years ago now? No, no, probably
Oh,
8 years ago, because
yeah.
I was in my circuit clerk office then. So, and I remember talking to her about it, and she's like, "This is what my constituents want." I go, "Yeah, but when you're in the courtroom, like you should really talk to some of the judges because they don't look at it that way anymore. They're looking at best interest that if that child comes in and, mom or dad's an alcoholic or
Mhm.
mom or dad is a major gambler or having people inappropriately in the house, like there's certain things that, you know, they will that will always trump, and
Mhm.
Sure.
impact best interests. And so
Biological
best
thing,
interests
right?
isn't technically biased, even though I think people still think, well, the statute's the same, so therefore it's biased, but it's really not. It's the evolution
Mhm.
of people's lifestyles that has changed the court's view
Yeah.
on this. And we're now seeing too, I mean, the judges that are in office now, very few of them were in office when Rebecca and I started in family law. And so, or even when I was in the state's attorney's office. So you're getting the younger generation of judges coming up who look at things differently too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, no, I
it's
mean, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, so social roles are changing, identity, dynamic.
right.
Like you said, I mean, this isn't, pre 1950s America anymore, folks. I mean,
Right.
it's, where the woman stays home and the man goes out and
Mhm.
earns
Right.
the bread, makes the bread. It doesn't work like that anymore. In some cases it does. And, but the notion of like a stay at home mom right now is diminished massively.
Massively.
And some would argue that that's bad, actually, not necessarily because it's the mom, but just because now both parents have to work because everything's so damn expensive.
Mhm.
That's another.
And I also think that for a while, and Erin, tell me if you disagree, but for a while, when we were first practicing and had been practicing for a while, I think because there was this idea that it's always the mother, moms thought they could get away with things. You know what I mean? In
Like
some of
sending
the
the kids
cases,
to the
like,
room on trumped up charges so they can drink martinis and watch Maury Povich.
well,
I think it was more
sometimes
going
more
out.
drastic than that, but I think there were some women who always assumed, like, I don't have to be reasonable. I don't have to,
Right.
cooperate. I don't have to do any of those things because I'm the mother, and of course they're going to prefer me. And I think women have been very much disabused of that lately.
Yeah, and I would say that even, back when if a woman went out drinking with her friends today, that's a big deal in the courtroom. 10 years ago, it was like, oh, she went out with it
Mm-hmm.
was just mom. Mom needed a break. Well, men were getting a hard time for that 10 years ago, but the women weren't. And now they are. I mean,
Yeah.
people can't just go out and do whatever it is they feel like doing and then expect the court is going to just say, well, we have a bias because that's changing,
Yeah,
you
no,
know.
that's interesting. As well as it should.
And
Um,
they're also just too, I'm sorry,
mm,
subjective, like judges have their own subjective and objective views as well. And so you may have a judge that likes a glass of wine at night and doesn't care if a
Mm-hmm.
party has a glass of wine at night, and you're going to have another judge that is totally against drinking and doesn't think a child should ever be around a glass of wine. And so
Yeah.
you've
that's
got those
interesting.
issues too. I mean, we've had it all over the board. I mean, I remember we had one judge that marijuana, whatever, and that was before it was legal. And
But then we
now
did
it's
have another judge for quite a long time where if they found out that the parents were drinking around those kids, it was a problem.
Really,
mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so
that's
you
interesting.
had to be really it really you really have to be careful because it really is much more neutral now. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, neutral in the law is good. That's a good thing. I was going to say, like, kind of like that whole "I'm the mom" thing that you were
Mm-hmm.
saying, Rebecca. Like, I just remember growing up, and like, I think that a lot of kids will probably, or people will remember this. Like, that was the phrase of absolute authority.
Mm-hmm.
Do this. Why? Because I'm your
I'm your
mother.
mother and I'm your father.
Okay. We got somebody asking, do you have any advice on how to approach false accusations in a custody battle? Ooh, that's a good one.
oh, that's tough.
Boy,
It
that
depends
is
on the
very
false
tough.
allegation, depends on the evidence that you have that it is not a false allegation. Would you have people who would back you up? But it absolutely depends on it's going to be a case by case.
Yeah.
That's a
Because it depends
tough.
on so much stuff. So custody issues are always determined based on the best interest of the child. And there are a number of factors that go into the best interest of the child. One of them is the child's age and maturity and their desires and things like that. When false allegations come into play, I would say most judges would appoint like a guardian ad litem or somebody to represent the child or children
More interesting.
to see if they can get to the truth of, whether something did or didn't actually happen. And that's usually how most courts, I think, would approach handling something like that. Unfortunately, false allegations happen daily.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
in
tough one. Thank you, Sammy's camera. That would be a really tough one. Again, like if you're
Yeah.
falsely accused and you know that you are falsely
Mhm.
accused, but like nobody else is buying it, what do you do? Like, holy
Right.
cow, man.
And I
That's
Well,
have
and
had, yep, go ahead,
yeah.
Erin.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I always manage expectations when I'm in a
Mhm.
first consult with a client because they'll say, so and so's saying all these things about me. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised because this is the divorce. Everyone's
Mhm.
scared. They want to win. They want to make the other person feel bad. And one of the things I'm trying to remember who said this, but it was actually on a talk show, and I was like, "Now you're talking." And it was a while ago. It was probably 15 years ago I saw this, but they said that people should not get divorced until they're no longer angry because
Mhm.
you can't think rationally when you're getting divorced, and all you want to do when you're mad at someone is win. And that's just human nature. There's nothing you can do about it. And so that's how we behave, right? So you have to expect they're going to come up with these allegations, and then you have to have a lawyer who's listening to you and working with you, and then comes up with the best strategy on that allegation. And sometimes, as Rebecca said, it's about having a guardian ad litem appointed to represent the best interests of the child if it's a custody situation. But this is unfortunately so common, and that is, I want to say, one of the hardest parts about putting the court into a family dynamic.
Yeah.
Because even when little kids are young, they will, parents will coerce the little kids to say something to the guardian ad litem, or, and then the other person's angry about it, and then they go talk to the child, and then the child gets put in the middle, and then both of the parties are in trouble. It's really, really very difficult. For you figure one judge is sitting there and he has to decide who's telling the truth, who's more
Yeah,
credible,
that's tough.
who's got the correct information. Was mom really drinking on that boat? Is that even true? Did dad make it up? Is he trying to hurt mom? Is it, I mean, it's a nonstop, constantly trying to filter all of these allegations and figure out what's right.
Yeah.
And that is the hardest part. I mean, you get into financials and people, oh, she spent all this money doing, shopping at Coach, and then so and so did this and so did that with all the money, and the money's all gone. And then the attorney has to decide, well, does that mean that it hits what we call dissipation, which means that somebody, after the marriage, after the separation of the marriage, did somebody go blow a ton of money at Coach, like, even though that was their lifestyle? And then the judge has to figure out, well, was that their lifestyle, or did this person really go abuse this money just to go do it to hurt the marital estate before the divorce? So that is, I think, why they always talk about trust in the judicial system. That's like a huge thing right now with the judges, especially our own Justice Elizabeth Rochford, who's our Supreme Court Justice from Lake County. She is on a big mission to try and improve trust with the courts, but she's got a tough job, because nobody feels satisfied when you walk out of a family law courtroom. You always feel like the underdog, even when you win. And the whole thing feels terrible. And so that's why I always love that quote: you shouldn't be angry when you go into your divorce. But that's what creates these divorce filings.
Well, I was going to say, that's why you're getting divorced. It's because you're angry.
Yeah.
So, and how long is it going to be before you're not angry? You can't predict that.
Well, and sometimes it's never. And that's the problem.
Exactly.
Those are the cases.
Right.
Yeah. I always say that the best outcome of any sort of family law case is where both parties are equally unhappy, because that's sometimes the best we can hope for.
Is it very true? I tell clients that too. I say, hey, neither one of you are happy. That means that it's probably fair.
Right.
So
that's that makes sense. I get you. So all right, we're over an hour. That flew by. Holy cow. That's how interesting this conversation was. Thank you. And Alexandria Keating Sofiaki said earlier, she said, fun fact, ethics, where is it? Fun fact, ethics descends from the Greek word. She's very proud of being Greek. From the Greek word ethos, meaning character or habit. Okay, I'll take your word for it. She's asking one more question if you have a minute. Any resources for low-income individuals looking for representation?
Absolutely. Depending on what kind of representation.
Yeah, we have pro bono lawyers. Most lawyers will do up to 10 hours a year. We also have Prairie State Legal Services, the Northern Illinois Legal Aid. Shiva in Highland Park used to provide some legal representation. I don't know if they do anymore or not, but I'm sorry.
Shalva.
Rebecca, do you have other ones?
Shalva, I think, is what they're called.
Oh, Shalva. That's right. I'm sorry. I'm not
What
Shiva.
did you
We're
say,
not sitting Shiva.
Shiva's a Hindu god of war and death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prairie State is usually a go-to in Lake County. They've got an office right in downtown Waukegan, and it depends on the kind of case you have, though. So they will take certain kinds of cases, but they won't take other kinds. But yeah, it's I'm trying to think of what the other one is that we do some pro bono stuff for. Yeah, I think you already said it, Metropolitan Family Services.
Northern Illinois Legal Aid Clinic.
Okay, yeah, so that's a different one.
Or
So there's another one
Suburban.
in Chicago that's the Metropolitan Family Services or something like that, and they provide services for lower income folks.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, the place I've seen it most difficult so far to find some pro bono help has been McHenry. Like when I've talked to people, they've struggled to find pro bono help, but I don't know the McHenry's you know, set up for their bar association there as well. But a lot of times if you call the bar association for that county, they will have information where to help you.
Right.
Find help. I mean, we used to have a pro bono through the bar association, but do we still have it through the bar association? Yeah, I think, yeah.
No.
But yeah, there are quite a few. But yes, they can be particular. Some of them are related, have you been the victim of domestic violence? You have to have that as a prerequisite to have their representation. But yeah, I would call your bar association and ask them in your area if you're not Lake or Cook.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, and Sammy's camera, if you live in Lake County and you want to DM me on Facebook, my name is David Rich, RYCH, and I can help connect you with some of these things. Because I don't know if you were able to catch all of that. So yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, ladies. I appreciate it. Fascinating conversation, always is. Law is fascinating, it really is, and so important. And that's the big part, because you're just dealing directly with people's lives, and and crime and all sorts of just terrible things. So thank you both for what you do, because I wouldn't do it.
You'd actually be good at it, though.
Huh?
You'd be good at it if you did, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe. I mean,
never too late.
No, it is. I'm not going back to school. I've done enough school. I'm good. I work in a law office once a week. That gives me my fix there. But thank you. Yeah. So like with family law, I don't think I could do it because of psychological, emotional reasons, especially when it comes to children. That would really, really mess me up. And criminal, like I don't want to help of somebody who killed somebody else. I don't want to do that. So, but they definitely need
representation. You have to change your mindset. You have to change your mindset.
Yeah, I'm not. I've changed my mind enough times in my life. I was studying philosophy, and how many different types have changed my mind. So anyway, thank you so much, Erin Cartwright, Weinstein, Lake County Circuit Court Clerk, and Rebecca Whitcombe, family law lawyer, for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And so fun news, big news, thanks to Erin here. A week from this Friday, I'm going to be, as far as I know, interviewing our District 10 Congressman, Brad Schneider. That's exciting.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Exciting. Yeah,
I met him one time in a parade. Like, it was brief, like, hi, I'm David Rich. And that was when I was working at WRLR. So, I already told a bunch of my friends, are like, oh, ask him this and ask him that and ask him this.
You have a list.
Yeah, exactly. So I might actually shut off the comment section because some of the questions weren't very polite. But so, okay, we'll see. So thanks for coming on the show, everybody.
All right. Happy to be here.
Yes.
Right. Thanks for tuning in to us. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Talk Lake County, everybody. Until next time, keep talking. Hold on a second, ladies. Oh, don't go away.